Immediately after World War II, the American people were subjected to a massive propaganda barrage, which favored the Chinese communists and frowned on the Chinese nationalists. Newspapers, books, magazines, and experts in government did their best to convince Americans that the Red Chinese were not communists at all, but were merely agrarian reformers seeking fair play for the Chinese people. In the midst of this propaganda blitz, our government completely turned its back on the nationalist Chinese in 1947, refusing even to sell them arms. By 1949, the communist forces under Mao Tsé-Tung had seized all of mainland China. After the communist takeover, serious students of the situation lost no time in declaring that China had been lost in Washington, not in Peking or Shanghai. And they were correct. Eventually, the full truth about the Chinese communists became widely known. This U.S. Senate subcommittee report, published in 1971, contains gruesome statistics which show that the Chinese communists have murdered as many as 64 million of their countrymen. Despite current propaganda to the contrary, Communist China continues to this day to be one of the most brutal tyrannies in the history of mankind. And the Chinese Reds have exported revolution and terror to every continent. The American people were misled 30 years ago. If the truth about China had been widely known, our government would never have intervened in the Chinese struggle as it did. China would not have fallen into communist hands. There would never have been a Korean War in the 1950s, and there would never have been a Vietnam War in the 1960s and 70s. The course of history would have taken a far different path if only the American people had not been misled about the Chinese communists. In the late 1950s, the American people were again misled. We were told that Fidel Castro was the Robin Hood of the Sierra Maestra Mountains, that he was the George Washington of Cuba. Some Americans knew better and tried to spread the alarm. But in spite of their efforts, our government repeated the process it had followed in China, and Castro eventually seized control of Cuba. Again, the American people had been misled. If the truth about Castro had been widely known, our press and our government would never have aided him, and he would never have succeeded in capturing Cuba and in spreading communist subversion throughout Latin America and now even into Africa. The question we must ask ourselves today is, are there any other important but similarly erroneous attitudes that have been planted in the minds of the American people? The answer is that there certainly are. One dangerously wrong attitude held by many Americans is that all prominent businessmen in America, the American capitalists as they are called, are by definition the arch enemies of communism. In fact, the mere suggestion that a prominent capitalist like David Rockefeller is in league with communists invites scorn or ridicule. The notion appears to many to be totally absurd because a man like David Rockefeller, it seems, would have so much to lose if the communists should ever triumph. But in the last few years, David Rockefeller's Chase Manhattan Bank has been favored by the Reds as the first American bank to open an office in Moscow, and also the first to do so in Peking. And this same Chase Manhattan Bank has bankrolled the building of the largest truck factory in the history of mankind at a place called the Kama River in the Soviet Union. It is totally inaccurate to consider David Rockefeller an enemy of communism. It is also inaccurate to believe that all prominent businessmen in our nation are conservatives who are always the most determined opponents of socialistic government controls. We agree that businessmen should be anti-communists and that they should be advocates of limited government, as given us by our founding fathers. But many are not. As communism continues to advance toward total world domination, as America's place in the world slips from undisputed leadership to second-rate status, and as our own federal government's control over all of us grows with each passing day, many Americans are looking for an explanation of what they see happening. We believe that the first step toward learning what is really going on in our country is the realization that some so-called capitalists are neither conservatives nor anti-communists. Instead, they are power seekers who are using their great wealth and influence to achieve power. Not only the kind of power that flows from great wealth, but absolute power, the kind that can only be achieved politically.